guest who's been on previously, Andy Teece from Saab Teece Accountants. Welcome back. How you doing?
Yeah, well, thank you.
What are the traits that you see separate the businesses that are around for a long time, and what do you see with the traits that businesses don't last?
I think it's important to have consistency. I think with so many things, whether it's property investing, whether it's building a business.
I see that then the asset dwindling. It's almost handed off to the kids and go, right, you take this. Can they run this business, or are we better off selling this on the open market and we all win?
The first thing that I suggest to clients that are looking at passing businesses on to family members is that if there are multiple children, then a commercial price should be paid for that business.
If you've got a family business, this could be particularly a great asset. You could renovate it to sell it. You could renovate it to rent it out. And if you're putting all that sweat equity into property, but you've put that sweat equity to build your business, wouldn't you want to realize the value of that as well?
And then in retirement as well, there are some significant tax plays that you can achieve, tax planning opportunities there to really make it worthwhile and beneficial.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. So the flavour of today's chat is going to be, you deal a lot with self-employed clients, for example. So if you're self-employed, definitely this is for you. Property investing, I do see as your way of having your own business, the way that you manage your cash flow, the way you grow your portfolio, for example. So we're going to unpack that for property investors to really change the lens that you have around your portfolio to see yourself as effectively the owner of that business, that asset. And then we're going to go through a few of the mindset bits and pieces that I really feel speak to a lot of people when it comes to paying tax and trying to minimize tax, trying to make decisions because of tax, for example. And yes, that becomes important, but there are ways to be tax effective, but there are also ways to grow your wealth without trying to dodge or minimize tax as well. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'll get through that. And I'm really excited because I think for us, especially when I talk to clients about, do I buy through a trust? Do I buy through a company? Do I buy individual names? Do I buy through a self-managed super fund? There are a lot of opinions out there. And I guess we're going to talk about what's fit for purpose, what's right for your journey. So if this is you have any of the above boxes, we're going to tick a lot of those and hopefully you get a lot out of Andy's chat. But Andy, for those that may not have listened to your previous episode, we'll include links to that. But for listeners, you pitch yourself with your YouTube calling 2 cents. I think we're going to get more than $2. We're going to get some real good value out of you. And we spoke before, 3 kids of your own, blended family. And then you got your accounting business, which has been in your family for 50 years. So you know a thing or two about running an intergenerational business as well. I often think that we broke the rules when I worked with my wife and my brother-in-law, but you've certainly crossed a few generations in your time as well, mate. So I'd be very curious if you want to kind of share your journey and how you got here today.
Yeah, so I started working with my father, who started the business back in 1962, so a bit over 60 years actually. It was a real family sort of business with my mum was working in it and her sister, Auntie Helen, as well. Right. So, there were challenges, across those generations, but challenge is always, an opportunity. So, working through that and working with a bunch of people who really cared and we were all on the same page, I think it was really beneficial. It was beneficial for us. It was beneficial for my learning and it was also very beneficial for the clients as well. So I think everyone's done very well out of that. Then about 7 years ago, I looked to merge the practice. We had some clients doing some wonderful things and I just needed to make sure that I kept pace with that in terms of resourcing and skill sets and grew with those clients. So it's been great.
Excellent. I mean, that takes a different iteration in your business. We were having a chat before. You probably have seasons in your business as well and you kind of go that early stage and, time when your dad's growing the business and then to pass the baton on and then for you to then see what's on the horizon to then merge and move in with another practice as well, then gives you another string to your bow, which is probably better back end support as well. Absolutely. Probably have better leverage with expertise that comes along with that too.
Yeah, most certainly. And those were the 2 key things: the resources to be able to take on work, and then the skill sets. You just can't know everything. The tax law is very complex, and just managing those clientele requires different skill sets. And by merging the practice, we've really broadened that and been able to, I believe, deliver a really good service to the clients.
Yeah.
And drag the appropriate person in when required.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, I'm just going to touch on anyone that's self-employed and we know the odds is, I don't want to say stacked against you, but you look at the success versus failure rate in running your own business. what is it? 1 out of every 2 or 3 businesses won't last more than 3 years.
Yeah.
Of those businesses, you get to 4 out of 5 aren't profitable by maybe the 50-year mark. One of those 10 businesses are lasting after 10 years as well, if I've got these stats right.
That sounds about right.
And yeah, it's a real war of attrition. You've probably seen businesses that have stuck with your accounting practice along that journey for the 50, 60 years, for example, and then you've probably seen businesses that have come and gone. What are the traits that you see separate the businesses that are around for a long time, and what do you see with the traits that businesses don't last?
Look, I think it's important to have consistency. I think with so many things, whether it's property investing, whether it's building a business, having that consistency and just saying, some days, you don't want to get up and go at it, but you just have to. Those are probably the days in particular that you really have to. I think in terms of planning, I think businesses that do well, it's not by accident. They take the time out to, make some strategic decisions for the coming 6 or 12 months. And in some cases, you're making decisions a little bit further out. You might understand that some of those action items might change a little over that period of time, but you do have to plan. I think that's really important. And reduce that plan to writing and revisit the plan. The plan can change, but there needs to be a plan.
Yeah. When I guess we were talking before as well about AI, and I think we're coming to this new frontier of what got you here won't get you there in the next phase in business. I genuinely see this writing on the wall. I think it's exciting. I think the prospects are there across industry, across property investing, across wealth management, for example. How do you see AI having a role to play moving forward?
Look, I think it's really important that any of us in these sorts of industries, whether it's mortgage broking, accounting, whether it's financial planning, whether it's legal, engineering, we need to be using the tools. Now, because the industry is so young, we're not going to be in a position to project where it's going to be in 5 years' time and exactly how it's going to be helping us. But the key thing is to be using the tools at hand, trying certain things out and just keep tinkering with it. What we do know is that your process-driven activities are going to be, in some ways gobbled up by AI, but it's not going to be able to do everything. That people component is always going to be there.
Have you seen any good practical examples? Have you seen anything that you go, hey, look, and we spoke about this, just really simple, low-hanging fruit. I could do this tomorrow, start with the most basic or menial of tasks and then kind of work your way out from being an L plater to being a P plater.
Look, I think it's a matter of just setting up your chat GPT or whatever it is. Now, one of the things that we're doing, and I did in particular the other day, I had a bit of complex tax advice. And I thought, how am I going to approach this? I want AI to sort of look at it.
Yeah.
I was able to drop the advice into ChatGPT, the email communication between the tax advisor and the client.
Yep.
Also dropped in, and I said, right, please set out for me the key points, the important issues that I need to focus on, any grey areas that might come under some scrutiny. And I just put it in there and thought I didn't have too much expectation about what it'd do. And it pulled out a really good, succinct answer. And then I followed up with a couple of questions as well. And I think following up with some further questions or specifics, or can you please explain in further detail things, I think those extra questions really hone your answer. But I do think it is a matter of, just put something in there. How might I approach X, Y, Z? And see what it says. And if you're sitting there thinking, I don't really know what it's talking about, or I'd like some further details, flesh out those steps, put that in a chat GPT, and it's a pretty good tool.
Yeah. If you're listening, sometimes you're a bit like me where your mind starts ticking over when you hear a podcast like this. You're like, oh, geez, mate, how's this actually going to work? let's just break this down in a couple of maybe good ideas. If you've got a decent portfolio, maybe you've got 2 properties and you could put in the addresses, here's what it's worth. If these properties compounded at, say, average return 6-7% on the next 2-3 years, what would this property be worth in 2-3 years? And here's my loan balance, and you could work out the rate and the amortization on the loan, for example. That's probably one good way. And then you go, what's your LVR, so your loan to value ratio? What's that going to look like in 3 years' time? And then do you know that you've got equity there for future acquisitions? That's one. Whether your income, you need to see that increase by a certain level because your broker's told you where income needs to be for future purchases or acquisitions. Hey, how much do I need to earn to borrow here, for example? How much, what does my income trajectory need to look like? So if you're looking for some simple take-home ideas, I think for a lot of us, we get a little bit overwhelmed, bamboozled with the whole AI. And it's like, we've got to solve these big problems. Mate, personally, I'd love to see AI do my bloody laundry. I'd say, let's just start there and unpack my dishwasher before we move into doing brain surgery. But I feel like if you can take that practicality out of this chat and go, what does this mean for you as a listener? Jump in. You got Gemini, you got GPT, for example. You got a few tools there. Again, just pick one, double down on one. Learn, practice. I'd probably dug my head in the sand for a little bit here going, I don't believe it. This will never replace me. I'm far too specialist. And then you see what it can do and you're like, you get a bit of a dose of reality going, this has the, not the ability to replace me, has the ability to complement what I do. And again, you're learning. It's learning about you. You're learning how it works. It's a bit meet me halfway when it comes to how we're going to get the best out of each other.
Absolutely.
Again, a practical example was, if I'm training at the moment, so how do I optimize my training? And I put in what I'm doing. Here's what I'd like to get to, for example, give me a training plan. It gave me it. Now, whether you choose to do anything or not with it, it's up to you. It's like anything in life. Whether you choose to do anything with this podcast is completely up to you, just like what the outputs you'll get from, say, a GPT is. But at least you know what's available. So no one can come to you and going, I didn't know that. You know it. It's at your fingertips. Andy and I, we were talking again before about, say, team and specialists in our team. And I say, look, you've got 2 types of people. You've got order takers and problem solvers. And if you're listening and want to know how to take your income to the next level, become a problem solver. Straight up, I can't tell you how much problem solvers get paid more than order takers. And I've seen it. I feel like my team is a high-level problem-solving team. They will tell me things that go off the rails sometimes before I can see it. That's what I want. They become extremely valuable to me. Versus if I'm having a rent-a-brain team and it's like they're constantly coming to me with problems and they're coming to work to almost switch off or decompress from what's going on at a home level. And it's like, someone just tell me what to do here. That type of income or that role has a cap on it. You cannot break through an income cap because as an employee, you're not solving any big problems. As an employer, you're going, well, they're not really that role critical. And again, I hope this comes across in a helpful vein. This is not not a dig at anyone. It's just more to say, choose your hard. You can go into problem solving mode and solve some real problems for yourself and push your income up. And that shows up in your results. Or you can be order taker mode and just know that your income is capped. And if you really want to push through and buy more property, trusts aren't the silver bullet that's going to get you to like 6 properties. Income, like lower your expenses, increase your income. Like I see this crap on YouTube all the time about unlimited borrowing capacity through trusts. It's a load of crap. I've got to be brutally honest here. The amount of times people come to me, I'm like, look, mate, 80, 90K is a median income. We can't leverage the hell out of your income. We need to find a way to dial up incomes or reduce expenses. Tell me, what are we going to do here? And I say, generally, you are your best asset. Put the energy and effort into yourself to bump up the incomes, and away we go.
Yeah. And that's one thing that we see often. We understand that tax minimisation is something that every Australian, it's a national sport.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
that's the famous Kerry Packer. That famous interview.
Yeah. Don't tip them; they're not doing a good enough job. But I think it's important to understand where you are in your progress. And tax minimisation is wonderful. However, often, as you're sort of saying there, it involves the use of cash flow. Now, if you minimise your taxable income and use up your cash flow, that is contrary to wealth generation and using that money to create wealth, whether it's through property or through shares or whatever it might be. But, reducing your taxable income will reduce your borrowing power. And using a lot of the methods is using up cash flow, which again is not helping you to pay down debt and get ahead. And I think it's a difficult thing. It's something that you need to identify where you are in your stage of life, where you are in your stage of business. Perhaps as you sort of head toward retirement in those 5 years before retirement, you're really considering maximising your tax position. Potentially you're looking at superannuation strategies and things like that. But certainly at our ages, it's really about that top line and pushing that as hard as you can.
Moving the needle to build wealth. Sometimes I see, I'm 42, I see 40-year-olds dumping a huge amount into super. I'm like, that's cool. Pay off your mortgage probably quicker. Like that, you live debt free. You've got instant equity. Go and buy a few more investment properties. Again, this isn't advice. This is purely just when I'm talking case by case examples here. And it's going, well, they're trying to skirt tax minimization. My accountant has been very, very clear. You earn more money, you pay more tax, and we'll deal with the outcomes later. We'll find ways. And then it becomes a discussion around trusts or moving money to different companies, for example. And it's legitimate ways. But when the pie gets bigger, you now have, again, we have bigger problems to solve and better problems to solve. When you're trying to shrink the pie, and again, I feel like both our professions can really play in that bottom space, which is go to a broker, get the lowest rate. Go to an accountant, pay the minimum, pay the least amount of tax. And we're almost like the opposite end of that.
Yeah,
I don't care about rate. You probably don't care about how much someone's paying tax. So I say that flippantly, but more just to go, if you think it's about tax minimization or you think it's about the lowest interest rate, you've missed the point.
That's right. And I think that's a matter of having the discussion with people and understanding what they're trying to achieve. And as we were talking about before, if someone's got a strategy to build a property portfolio over the next 5 to 10 years, the way they'd approach their borrowing is a little different to someone who, is looking to accumulate a property over the next 20 years. Similar to us, if, someone wants to create wealth, use their income to do that, their strategy in terms of business, their strategy in terms of year-end planning is going to be quite different to someone, potentially a bit older who's just looking purely at that, reducing that taxable income, reducing that tax liability.
Yeah.
But it's horses for courses.
Yeah, that's it. Mate, you and I are probably in a very fortunate position. We get to see under the hood of a lot of people's financials. And again, there's no judgment when we're dealing with people. Everyone, again, is running their own race. They've had life issues. They've had relationships, whatever it is. There's been something that's happened along. Everyone's got a story.
At this stage.
Everyone has, right? And I guess what we're looking is, okay, how do we not dwell in the past, but how do we look forward? So look in the front mirror, the windscreen as opposed to the rear view mirror. But a big part of what I see when it comes to self-employed is how much sweat equity they've put into their business. And it's unfortunate that you could have someone that's probably earning less, working less, that could buy property, that could earn more through their property equity than someone with their blood, sweat and tears going to like sweat equity into a business. Do you see? You probably see that with people just they're working bloody hard, slogging their guts out. They've got credit cards, a line of credit against their home, whatever. They've gone all in on this property and it's all in on this business. If they just put that money into property, they might have got a better return. It's a very hard thing to say sometimes. But you probably see that.
Yeah, look, we do. And I think it's hard. Business is hard, being in business.
Absolutely.
And it's, I sort of go, what, if you are in business, really try and maximise it. Do as well out of it as you can. I think it's important as well to be realistic. And if you are 3 years in, 5 years in, and what you had thought you were going to be able to do, you have not, sometimes it's important to sit down and reassess and say, am I better off as an employee? Because we do take our problems home. It's rarely a 40-hour week for a business owner.
You haven't paid super maybe for those years if you're not making enough money as well. So you've got a loss, like a desert period of maybe 3 to 5 years where that super hasn't compounded as well. You haven't been able to buy property because your incomes aren't. If you're renting or you have a property, you can't upgrade.
And so in terms of that and making some hard decisions. We really like to work similar with the property and investing on a, set out ahead of time some if-then parameters to remove the decision-making, because, we know time goes past and it's easy to be 12 months into a business and say, look, I'll just give it another 6 months. 6 months becomes 12 months. It hasn't, again, done what you wanted to do. You've not reduced anything to writing. That becomes 3 to 5 years. And we're still at a point where there's no clear line of decision-making. Whereas if that had been set out in writing, that we are going to give this 3 years, we are going to do this, this and this to achieve what we're trying to achieve. If that doesn't work out, if it doesn't eventuate at the end of that 3-year period or 5-year period, whatever the period is, then this is what we're going to do. And I just think that that's really important. And sitting down with clients, that are busy in businesses, that's what we like to do in terms of if they suggest that they would like to buy property, again, putting in place some if-then parameters and saying, what do you think is a reasonable time frame for you to find a property? And if they say 9 months, fantastic. Okay, so what are we going to do if after 9 months you haven't found a property? And I think that's then a matter of being realistic and saying, if life has got in the way, which it does, then automatically, what is the next step? And if that's been reduced to writing ahead of time, there's no decision to be made. The decision has already been made. So often we'll sit down, and if the client suggests that they'd like to buy a property, if they say that the 9-month period is an appropriate period of time, then if they don't happen to do that, maybe their life is too busy right at this point in time, and perhaps they need to consider getting a buyer's agent. If they still believe that property is the way for them to go, they're just not going to get to it. And we've had a lot of success doing that with clients. Again, just fleshing out what they want to do, what they're trying to achieve, and just, again, reducing it to writing so that it just removes that decision at that time.
I love it. And again, we're talking about business, the parallels that it has to property investing. We're looking for early signs of success is what I feel. So in your business, when you start to get, inquiries, or you start to get leads, or you start to get a few partnership meetings, they're the early signs of success that you're looking for. If you're a brand new accountant and you're like, can I pick up a few new clients tax year end, and you're really positioning yourself as an early stage accountant, for example, versus someone that's got 60 years in their practice, a very different proposition there as well. So early signs of success. If you're a property investor, you're looking for that. Is this property not a dud? So it's not coming inherent with problems. Good sign of success early on. Good tenants. Good sign of success. Am I seeing the income, the area that I've bought, start to see some, if you bought in a growth corridor, start to see some early signs of success there as well. So I really feel like we're not looking for an overnight win here. The businesses do not move that quickly, nor does your portfolio. But if you can start to see some early signs of success, you're on the right path as well.
Yeah, and it's important to play a long game, with property or business. There's no, you see all the time, someone built their property portfolio. Okay, there's no doubt there's some pretty serious risk.
So we're looking for exceptions to the rule here. You never know what happens in, I've seen it, people get inheritances, people get shares that vest or a company buyout. So there's always something that's gone on there. It's just they played a long game. It's like they've done this consistently over a long time, or there's been some type of windfall that really kind of accelerates their journey as well.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have the people who see that from the outside but really don't understand what's gone on behind it. And they come in and say, well, that person did it. Why can't I replicate that? And it's, both from your perspective and mine, it's like, well, we don't know exactly what the full story is. And once you unpack what the full story is, well, you can really compare and contrast their position as opposed to the individual who's come in to talk to you.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on. Perfect. We talked about minimizing or avoiding tax. I want to go there for a second for all our business owners that are jumping in. Even if you're investing in, talk about, I don't want to pay capital gains tax. I'm like, there's a success fee that comes with doing well. And I've got to say, look, travel to a lot of countries. Look, my family's background is Sri Lankan. I've been to Sri Lanka a few times. You want to see what a well-run government looks like. look at Australia. I'm sorry, you may not have to agree politically with what the parties stand for, but you want to see what stability looks for. You want to see what taxes go towards. So I'm talking medical, roads, education. We've got a high standard of living here. Clean water. I mean, you go to Sri Lanka, you don't drink water out of the taps. You go to most of Asia, you're not drinking water out of the taps. For example, South America is probably the same, parts of Europe. So I look at this going, we have a high cost of living. We have a very high standard of living. Success has a tax to pay the tax.
Yeah. And then it becomes around, how do we structure things so that we can reduce that as far as possible?
Yep.
How do we time capital gains events?
Cool.
As people sort of head towards retirement, I was talking to a lady yesterday and she said, look, I'd like to sell an asset. I said, well, you can sell that now and you pay tax at the top marginal tax rate, or, retirement is not too far on the horizon. If you feel that the investment is sound and it's not going to reduce too much in value or whatever, that's something that she needs to consider. The tax implications of selling that property in 2 or 3 years' time are going to be far different and far more beneficial to her if she holds off a couple of years. So that's where we see the big, those big ticket items are in the structuring, in the timing. And then the other thing as well is in your loan structuring and having a good broker and a good accountant. We, unfortunately, too many times over the years, I've had clients come in and I haven't seen them for a while and they've said, you're going to be stoked. I've just gone and bought a property. I've done this. And I'm like, fantastic. Did you set the loan up like this? And they're like, oh, no, I just put a whole cash into my investment property.
Yeah,
drag the money out of the the home offset account or something like that. And it's like, unfortunately, a simple email or phone call to us or using the right broker could have had a very different outcome, and that outcome is an annual thing throughout the life of the loan. So those are the things that we see that really are the big ticket items that far outweigh. Unfortunately, we see people trying to chip around the edges looking for, really what amount to quite minor tax benefits. Where some of the really big ticket items are staring them in the face if they get the right advice.
Oh, mate, you're spot on. I think we love when we and I've advocated for this a lot. The property market rewards action takers and decision makers, so we really advocate for that. There's a tempered energy you got to come with. Going, you got to get your ducks in a row before you pull the trigger. And I think a lot of people go, I took action, I bought property, and it's like, hey, we've got some that have used a heap of cash when they've got a mortgage. And it's like, hey, we could have done something, say, debt recycled around here, for example, or a different structure. And you and I probably come from a place of love where we don't want to rub salt in the wound because it's done. And at this point, there's no point dwelling in the past. But you just go, hey, a little bit of hastiness has cost you in the long term. If you just slowed down to speed up, we'd have a slightly different outcome here. And it's very hard when people are so excited and people have this fervor to keep moving. If I don't get into the market now, rates going to drop and it's going to accelerate, or I'm missing out on growth in this particular market. It's like, yes, I hear that, but also we've got to get things right. And it can feel a little bit like a handbrake at times as well, can't it?
Absolutely, because it can set things back. If their strategy is to build a portfolio over a period of years, they could have used up some of their cash flow. Some of that deposit money could have been used for the second property. For example, and could have still been quite effective in saving some tax if there were offset facilities set up.
Yeah.
So,
small things. You mentioned there around a season, you got times in your life, and I speak to a lot of people at different stages. 20s, I really feel like it's lower incomes, high energy, want to get in, a lower deposit. You move into your 30s, you're probably thinking about putting down roots. You'll see a lot of people started thinking about family planning or where they're going to live. Do I buy my own home? Do I continue to rent first? You get into your 40s, your income's now starting to really tip up. You've got 10, 12 years experience, particularly in what area or field that you've got. So the incomes really start to have that trajectory growth. Then also comes living expenses, whether it's kids going to school. Doesn't have it. The private or public, kids are damn expensive.
Yep. The activities.
That's it. And then you got travel. There's a lifestyle that comes, and probably lifestyle creeps kicks in as well, whether you're trying to maintain a lifestyle or have a lifestyle or show you got a lifestyle as well. And then I've always said, Peter Raptor says it best in his episode. He's like, you really find out people who have made money by their 50s and coming into their 60s. And it probably comes to people that have to work to pay off their mortgage versus people that want to work and that want to continue to stay active, healthy, plugged into a workforce, for example, as well. And that's when the water goes out and you see who's swimming naked as well, right?
That's right. And a 65-year-old that's working because they want to work, versus a 65 who's working because they have to work. Yeah, they are going into work on a Monday with in a very different headspace. Again, that 65-year-old who's choosing to work, they've put certain things in place over a period of years in the lead up to that. That's put themselves in that position. And it is during our 40s when we are busy, with families and all the things that go along with it, that it is most important to take the time.
It's really hard. I can tell you. I'll tell you right now. I feel like it was only when Zara, our second, got to maybe about 2 years old. So we got a 2-year age gap between Senna and Zara. It only felt like once we got to maybe 4 and 2, and had this almost exact conversation with someone the other day. It's only then you can feel you come up for air. You're not as mentally drained, fatigued. You're sleeping probably a little bit more, which means you can make better decisions. Return to work incomes then start to pick up. There's a little bit more consistency around that. Yes, you'll go through a period of daycare fees, depending on what income band you're on and how much support you'll probably get, or family support. But then you can almost see there's a future in what we're building here together. But if you don't put down those roots nice and early, excuse me, you could go 5-10 years into the wilderness and then you feel like, hey, I've missed out on 5 years worth of growth. And it's really hard to accelerate or shortcut that because you may have been out of the market for quite some time.
Yeah. And I think as well, whether you're in a successful business or you're in a high-paying job, that's happening because you are busy, you are working hard, you are mentally drained at the end of the day. And there is the temptation to say, or to think to yourself, I can play catch up. Whereas someone on a more modest income, really, if they want a comfortable retirement, they need to do something as early as possible. Yeah. And we've seen many clients who have had quite modest incomes throughout their working lives have a very, very nice retirement because they've played a long game and they've just chipped away at it.
I'm glad you brought this up. And anyone listeners would know that this is probably one of the big bugbears that I have, which is people that are on higher incomes aren't forced to invest. And I've always said, I don't want to sound contradictory because before at the start I said, earn as high an income as you can. That gives you options. It's almost when they get to that high income level, I'm talking 250K, 300K plus, for example, they're going, well, hang on, I could just keep working more. I can break through that next role, get the next bonus, for example. And it almost feels like pedestrian to invest in properties at 500K, for example. And they know that now the income trajectory continue to scale up. But I often say it is a blessing and a curse. It's a double-edged sword on those incomes. You lose that income. It's very hard to get a role straight away. You could be on the sidelines for maybe 6 months. The recruitment process is intensive, long-winded, for example. And if you take a paid cut to get back into the workforce and you're used to having a lifestyle at that level, you've got to adjust your lifestyle, temper that lifestyle as well. So there's so much that happens at that high income level that it's like it's never a sure thing. You're never guaranteed. A change of a CEO, a change of a board, and your role could suddenly be under scrutiny as well. And where do you go to? Or you've engineered a merger acquisition. Now you've done yourself out of a job as well. To your point, whereas someone that's on a median income knows they have to invest, so they've got a bit more fervor. They've got the time, the focus, because they're going, if I don't invest, I can't leverage my income, and I know my income's somewhat capped as well.
Yep. Yeah. And then, I think the other thing as well is for those higher income earners, they are working hard. They are, they've put themselves in that position over the years. Yeah. And they want to reward themselves.
Yes.
And they deserve to reward themselves.
Yeah.
However, I think like everything else, it should be planned. And I am a bean counter, but we can't live our lives by the dollars all the time. However, you can decide what that reward should be in terms of value and the frequency of it and set that out. And if it fits in the budget, fantastic, then do it. But if those sorts of things, can be death by 1,000 cuts every weekend, I deserve this. And unfortunately, the cash goes, the time is then not taken to look to future investment. And it is often those higher income earners, if they haven't made provision throughout their working lives, they are the ones who have the biggest difficulty adjusting their lifestyle in retirement. And, it is at our ages that it becomes really important to say, what am I going to do over the next 10 to 15 years? Because that's still plenty of time, even if you're starting from scratch today at 45.
Well, think about where you were 15. You were 30 15 years ago.
Yes.
So if you're at 45 and you're trying to get to 60, you're not saying you can catch up, but you can make a massive leapfrog in those 15 years. Yeah,
especially when you are on those higher incomes. But what you don't want to be doing is getting to 55, 60 and be having to play catch up. That's when, potentially, I have seen people who are behind the 8 ball and they've started to take some risks.
High risk, that you need high growth, high returns, so it's high risk at that point.
Yeah, and, at that sort of age, those things can be very difficult to recover from if, worst case sort of happens.
Yeah.
So, definitely need to carve out the time. If that means, setting calendar reminders and having a meeting with your spouse, that's what we do in business. If we want to undertake some strategic planning, if we want to, really get ahead, we set a time, we make the meeting, and not enough people do that at home with their finances.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I mean, that's one of my favorite quotes, which is, show me your diary and show me your bank account. We'll tell you what your priorities are. And it's exactly to your point, which is, if you're saying that you made it important, show me in your diary where you've made time set apart, whether it's talking to a partner, whether it's talking to your accountant, planner, broker, whoever it is in your trusted inner sanctum, to go, okay, hit pause for a little bit. You may need to go away for a weekend. Bernie and I will do this, where we actually have to go away. It's a little bit unromantic to talk finances, but again, when you're in the midst of life, family, work, day-to-day routine, for example, to come up for that little bit of air is a luxury sometimes. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It could be a date night at a local cafe. If the kids, that's the other part, they're not dinners anymore. They could be brunches while the kids are at school, right? Yep. So you've got to think, where do I carve the time? What worked pre-kids or early stages may not be working for you now. So find a way that you got common time in your diary, for example, block it out. Yep, unsexy. There's an agenda. The bank accounts or laptops are coming with us as well. And we're actually going to talk through, and someone needs to take the lead. And I'll often have this. Someone needs to take the lead, bring the other person along the journey with you as well. If you listen to this podcast and you're 50 hours deep on knowledge, know that you got 50 hours on your partner and expecting them to come to your level. You got to allow them to play catch up. If you're opening doors in relationships and they go, I don't know who this person is, let them in and let them know who you're talking to, so they feel safe with the partners that you're bringing on. So they're not absolute strangers when you jump on that first intro call as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important for the partners to be on the same page. And as you say, one's got to lead. It is, in most cases, there is one partner.
Yeah, one captain goes out for the toss is what I say.
Yeah. But the other partner needs to be at least understanding who the players are, who your crew is that you're working with, and what you're trying to achieve. Because if they're not on board for the ride and they've also got access to the bank accounts, then it can be counterproductive.
Cool. Hey, mate, I want to bring up this spreadsheet because this is a piece of art if you're in the accounting space and you've generously shared it. So if you're listening, hang in there. We'll talk through this. So if you want to jump onto YouTube and watch this, you'll probably see what we're referring to. One of the big questions we have around, we spoke about tax and tax planning, is around land tax. And I think this is probably everyone's become aware of it after, say, Victoria introduced their exorbitant land tax or changes around land tax, for better use of a word there. So can you take everyone through what you've got here and also what people need to be aware of when it comes to, like, say, land tax thresholds and how that kind of breaks down state by state?
Yeah. So,
which I feel is a whole episode in itself. In a nutshell.
So firstly, land tax in New South Wales is assessed at midnight on 31st of December. So all the land tax notices are coming out now. So if you're receiving one, congratulations.
Yes. Success fee.
That's right. And, it in some ways it is a wealth tax. However, it is what it is.
Yep.
And then it's about managing that land tax. Land tax is a state-based tax. So all the states are different in their rates and applications, along with the threshold as well. In New South Wales, for example, an individual gets the land tax threshold, which is currently $1,075,000, and that's on the land value, not the value of the property. And whereas a discretionary trust, which is a really popular investment vehicle, we love the trusts, particularly the discretionary trusts, because you can stream income and get some real tax benefit out of it. The downside on that is that it does not get the land tax threshold.
Okay, cool. So let's double down that. So if I bought property as an individual, I'd have my land tax threshold. If we bought property in New South Wales in Bernadette's name, should be eligible for the threshold, respective for us individually. But if we bought through a discretionary trust, there'd be zero in terms of like a land tax threshold. Okay, cool. Yeah. So you've got competing priorities here. So again, listening, people say, look, buying in individual names, you'll cap out in servicing, particularly when New South Wales, the yields aren't that great, right? Circa 3 to 4% if you're lucky. But then you've got these land tax benefits versus your discretionary trust. Like you said, it is a good vehicle for scaling, but just has its own tax implications at that point.
And that's where, say with the company tax rates, on their way down, companies come back into the equation. We didn't use companies for, there is a reason to use any vehicle for structuring for a number of different reasons based on the individual circumstances. But for many years, companies were not used to buy property unless a particular set of circumstances arose. But it's coming back into play now. You get those sort of isolation of borrowings, benefits that you do out of a trust. They're a little bit easier as well, often for the bank and to handle. Trusts can be a bit tricky.
Not every bank's offering trusts or the rules around negative gearing, for example.
And the streaming of income as well. We get some tax benefits out of the streaming to adult children, for example. Then when we go to talk to the bank or broker, that can cause us some grief in terms of our servicing because the distribution's gone off to the. It's been great from a tax perspective. But
you've solved one problem, you created another. Is generally what happens there. So if we just go through it, so you've got individual names, you've got trusts, you've got companies, and then the fourth pillar, I'd say, is your self-managed super funds. They're probably the entities that you could buy in. Then you've got a land tax component. You've got so your gearing. So if you're positive or negatively geared, that component as well.
Yeah, and that's something that's got to be considered as well because, if the property was the only asset within a trust or a company, certainly a company, any losses are going to be retained, carried forward. You do get access to them down the track when it becomes positively geared. However, if you're after negative gearing, then a trust or company really is not the vehicle for you.
Perfect. And that's again, when we're speaking to a lot of people that are entering the property market, they want to buy through trusts. It's a longer game play because right here, right now, most properties, particularly when they're financed to say 90 or 100%, they're going to be negatively geared. And so you've got a negative gearing situation, but being through a trust, they're not getting that benefit that you would if they were in your individual name. Again, depending on your tax bracket, that could be a significant difference. But even then, take the tax brackets aside, households that are losing money for, particularly when things are tighter, to then play the long game, you've got to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
That's right. And that's again where a plan and revisiting that plan and tweaking as necessary is so important.
Yeah, cool. So thanks very much. So you got positive, negative gearing, capital gains tax rules that apply versus, the entity that you're buying in.
So the individual, whether it's in individual names or joint names, the tax will be as per the ownership. So if there's capital gains tax, what might have worked over many years with the higher income earner would be, say, the maximise the borrowing, get the tax benefit out of that. However, if that property is sold while that higher income earner is still working and it's been paid right down, capital growth, there's going to be a tax liability there. Within a trust and within a discretionary trust in particular, there's the ability to stream that income. And, as well, if you have adult children, those benefits of streaming that capital gain can be very, very good. We know that, that distribution needs to be physically made to the adult children, not just, wiped by an accounting journal entry.
Yeah. And when we talk adult children, we're talking, it's still family and money. So you've got to be careful to jam your kids up when you're.
That's right.
Because they're working and they've got their own tax
that's right. And if they're receiving some sort of, rental assistance or, government assistance there, it's really important to be considering that as well. And, if people are on, disability pensions and things like that, that can have impact as well. So it's not just simply look to the best tax result because you can cause grief elsewhere.
Well said. I'm glad you brought that up because we'll see distributions to older parents, for example, minors, and say, hang on, this isn't as tax effective as you maybe have realised. And you, like I said, you're solving one problem, but you're creating another. Particularly when we have kids and you're like, I'm distributing this income to you. Now they've got a whopping income tax. And it's like, well, hang on, you're just using me. I've seen this a few times where like the kids who are used for the parents' wealth plans. And fair enough, you've raised them. They do have their own opinions around tax and how you, in your savviness as well.
Yes, that's right. That's right. We've had a number of discussions with adult children, young adult children, about why they're paying their parents' tax. And
and my parents have made how much? I'll let you have that conversation. So if we just go through quickly around the other states, because I think other states have a bit more favourable land tax policies as well, right?
Yeah. So, we sort of stick to East Coast in terms of, the tax. It is a legal matter, so it is important to really get some, good advice on this. But certainly in Queensland, discretionary trusts achieve a land tax threshold as well. So we do ask clients again around their strategy. Are they looking to buy in New South Wales? If they're looking to buy in Queensland, traditionally a trust has been somewhat beneficial from a land tax perspective. Victoria obviously have gone through some changes recently. So, it is a matter of looking at it case by case and also being mindful of the fact that, these rates are changing and technically land tax was meant to be gotten rid of when the GST came in. But the states, it was just too good. So
it's like stamp duty. When New South Wales rolled it back from like the annual ongoing to bringing it back in the lump sum. It's like, they want the money up front. They don't want the annuity.
No.
Cool. So land tax discussions, and you mentioned, sorry, just to go back, discretionary trust versus a family trust. Can you clarify the differences there?
So often a discretionary trust and a family trust will sort of effectively be the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's usually what we call your family investment vehicle, and it's, really good and worthwhile. Another type of trust is a fixed trust. Now, because a beneficiary has a fixed entitlement, that fixed trust will get the stamp duty exemption.
Okay.
Sorry, the threshold. Simply because if we are 50-50 unit holders in that unit trust, that fixed trust, the income comes down to you. The income comes down to me, whether it's revenue or whether it's capital. So
it's about fixed and unit trust being the same interchangeable word? Yeah.
Well, a fixed unit trust. There's a couple of different types of unit trusts.
Yeah.
It's in order to achieve the land tax threshold, it needs to be a fixed unit trust where there is fixed entitlement to the income and capital.
Great. Yeah. Thanks very much. I know this is not an easy one, particularly if you're listening on audio.
Yeah, sorry,
it's probably not an easy one to take in. It's well worth having a chat to your accountant again. I said earlier, you got to slow down to speed up. These are conversations that you must be having. If you're not sure where you're buying, if you're not sure how many properties you're going to be buying, be open with your accountant. Say, I'm not sure, but I do have ambitions to maybe build my portfolio here. I know there's probably states that buyers agents are buying in now that probably weren't on people's radars 2-3 years ago, and they've got their own land tax and they've got their own stamp duty implications as well. depending on what entity you're buying. So this is not, hey, set the strategy in stone. We're locked down. We're going to buy 5 properties in WA or Queensland, and we're going to use a discretionary family trust. This can keep moving. This can keep updated in terms of where you're buying. It's a bit like a business plan, which is I didn't know that I was going to hit this revenue target. I didn't know my costs would be here, for example, and you've got to be able to adapt, change, move at the times a little bit as well. And I think that's, again, we talked about successes in business and successes in investment property. Plans match with what's going on at the moment on field. The team that you've got and then trying to maneuver to win the game plan will change and adapt in the third quarter, for example. And
And that's where I think working with advisors over the long term is so important. If you're able to call your advisor, whether it's a broker, an accountant, a financial planner, your buyer's agent, and it's the same person you've been dealing with for 5 or 10 years, they know all the background. You don't have to try and fill them in on where I'm at now and what I'm trying to achieve. All you have to do is call, that advisor up and say, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm considering, this is what's changed.
Yeah. Because you probably get this with people at their accountant. I haven't heard back from my accountant for a while. They're busy. I feel like I've forgotten about, for example, we'll get this with brokers. I've said, we're not perfect. You might catch us on a bad day.
Yep.
And it's going, hey, do I persist with my team and do they have the skill set and maybe I need to make myself a priority to them? Or is there a market where you go, hey, look, you may have outgrown your team as well?
Yes, and that's something as well that you do need to consider and, on a periodic basis. And it might simply be that you need to have a discussion with the advisor.
Well said.
From our point of view, I always talk to our team about the fact that things happen in people's lives that we are unaware of. And I have seen people who were pretty lax in their family business, just cruising, something's happened in their life, whether they've got a partner that's, ready to rock and roll or whether, they've had an epiphany and next minute they are shoulder to the wheel, pushing that business hard. And you think, where did that come from? I did not think that this individual was capable of stepping in and running that family business, and it's, worked wonderfully. I'm always waiting for great Aunt Gertrude to pass away, lovely old lady, 99, that I've really never met and had no, connection to, but she's watching me from afar and thinks I've done wonderful things. So if people do receive inheritances, that can change things as well. Now, we're not necessarily privy to that knowledge at the time. So it is important to have that conversation with your advisor and say, look, my circumstances have changed. I'd like to think about doing this, this, and this. Now, if you get a lack of response or a response that you're not comfortable with, then consider doing something. But, it can be a matter of the advisor just simply doesn't know what they don't know. And you bringing them into the loop means that, yep, okay, now you can get the right advice. But certainly if you do not feel that you're getting the right advice and you then try and reach out and get that, maybe it is time to consider making a move.
Nicely said, mate. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think there's a nice way to break up with a professional partner that you have.
Yep.
I think at that stage, sometimes emotions run a little bit high, a little bit embarrassed to have that conversation. I feel like the best conversations when clients have parted ways with us is when they've said, hey, look, here's what's happened and you've dropped the ball, or, we found someone closer, better. I'm like, okay, fair game. And we'll get better off the back of that, knowing this is why someone's moved on from us.
To understand, yeah.
Yeah, and we're like, okay, now we know what to work on versus the silent resignation or the silent leaving the business, leaving your partner. It doesn't give them that feedback loop sometimes as well to go, hey, look, someone's able to solve my problems better than you are, and that's life. Right? We've all left somewhere to be somewhere, and that will continue. So don't be scared of that. If that's you're hesitant to have that hard chat, just know it can go both ways as well.
That's right. And, I always say to our staff, there's no such thing as a bad client. And most
always
advisors...
anything is a perfect client as well, because if you're perfect, we're not right for you either.
Yeah, that's right. It cuts both ways.
Yeah,
that's right. So, sometimes you can be the right advisor for a period of time. And then, and that's what I was conscious of when, and one of the big drivers for me merging the practice, because I knew that a bunch of my clientele were doing some really good things, and I needed to make sure I had the resources and skill sets to, be the right advisor for them moving forward. Yeah. Otherwise, I was going to get to the point where I just couldn't be everything to everyone, and I was either going to get a number of letters advising that clients had left, or I was going to have to make the call, I'm sorry, I cannot service you to the level you need.
Yeah.
But that's, seasons as well, isn't it?
Totally. Totally. Talking about seasons, and you mentioned about businesses passing the baton on. Your dad passed the baton on to you. It may not have gone that way. Your dad may have gone, look, I'm going to cash in my chips. This business is my retirement card to play, for example. So I don't need to know the mechanics around it if your dad sold your business to you, but it's more to say I see a lot of family businesses that hold on, maybe as the parent, i.e. the business owner, starts to look at retirement, they take their foot off the pedal. I see that then the asset dwindling, and it's almost handed off to the kids and go, right, you take this, versus the discussion around, hey, this is actually an asset. Do the kids want to have a part to play in this business? Can they run this business? Or are we better off selling this on the open market and we all win?
Yeah. And I suppose the first thing that I suggest to clients that are looking at selling businesses, or passing businesses on to family members, is that I'm a strong believer in, that's an asset of mum and dad.
Yeah.
And if there are multiple children, then really a commercial price should be paid for that business. And I think that does a number of things. It means that the child coming through is making a commitment that they really want to be there. They want to be there so badly, they're prepared to put their hand in their pocket and, pay for this business. It also means that the other children aren't disadvantaged, and there's no awkward conversations down the track that, you got this for free and everything else has gone a third, for example. I also believe that these discussions need to be had as early as possible. Everything's about communication, and I think having those strategic discussions 3 to 5 to 7 years out, I think is so important. And
can I just jump in? Because we're talking about boomers that are pretty much like exiting businesses if we're talking about that retirement stage. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, look, maybe communication isn't the strongest point, because it's like, hey, mate, I've run this business my entire life. Don't tell me what to do. Yeah. What do you know? And it becomes a little bit like butting heads at this point, young bull versus old bull.
Absolutely. And we see this, we've seen this so many times over the years. And I think the boomers, they've done wonderfully well. There's no question they've been great for society as a whole, particularly in the Western world, I suppose. But I do feel that they are, a lot of them successfully have been workaholics. This is their baby.
Yeah.
This is where they're in control. And a lot of them are reluctant to let go. And I believe that can cause some real friction between generations. And I unfortunately have also seen it where people cannot separate that parent-child relationship. That was one thing that I was really fortunate with my father.
I see. So.
We had a great professional relationship. Yeah. So he didn't see me as the 8-year-old kid, and I think that's a hard thing, but I do believe that it's so important for, people to realise before they're pushed that times are changing. And particularly over this next 5 to 10 year period, it's going to be increasingly important for someone just with a bit of a different look on things. They're not necessarily better. I knew for many, many years from a technical perspective, I had no chance of competing with my father. Yeah, you just had that depth of knowledge.
From a technical perspective, but from a technology perspective, you would have come in and gone, I can wipe the floor with you. With all due respect, I'm saying that as well, right? Going, mate, the accounting platforms that have come out, you were able to probably get your head around that maybe more so than what your dad was, or you move into an era of social media or educational, advice that goes out on YouTube and things like that, and podcasts, and it's going. That's the changing the guard here. Yes. And I think you're right. There's a time where a parent will realize the guard is changing, and the ones that can adapt or evolve and go, my time has come.
Yes.
And maybe park the pride and a child to stand up. And it also shouldn't be a guarantee that a child will run the business if they're not the fit for it either. Like my dad ran a mechanical business. Got to tell you, mate, none of us belong. My brothers and I do not belong near a car. But I look at it, and my mechanics today don't have a database. They've got a decent workshop near us. They could be texting me every 6 months to let me know when my car is due for service. The invoices are out by hand. They could be, and they come in to do the terminal to pay. I'm like, you could pay a 25-year-old to just sit at the front desk and book cars and, do all the admin and paperwork, but the mechanics do it. I'm like, you guys haven't evolved. And it's sad to see sometimes that so many industries that are just stuck in but this is how we've done it.
That's right. And I think, if you are considering, if you are a boomer and you are looking down the barrel of retirement, I think it is important to be realistic and say, look, you know what, I might only have 5 years left. I might have 10 years left. What do I want to achieve over this period of time? And I think it's also so important, unfortunately we see clients, their business has been their baby and they've got to the end of it and they've just ridden that wave into the shore and they've closed the doors. And I think
you're sitting on so much.
There you go. Look, there's left money on the table.
Yep.
Their legacy, unfortunately, has been lost in terms of their business legacy. And there's also a number of clients who are sitting there.
Well said. We like
left
that
without. Yeah. We like the way they did things. And, so I think, again, it's all in the planning. So if you are 5 years out from retirement, I think, now's the time to sort of do something.
Thanks, Andy. I really love that we've wrapped up on this note because I feel like we're talking about assets here. This could be, if you've got a family business, this could be particularly a great asset. I've seen it firsthand where it didn't get sold. It just kind of shut the door and then there was no value. And I'm telling you, there's inherent value in any business. It's like any property. You could renovate it to sell it. You could renovate it to rent it out, for example. You renovate it to pass on to your kids. Whatever you're doing, there is an asset here that we're talking about. And it's like, well, how do you see that asset? And if you're putting all that equity into property, sweat equity into property, but you've put a sweat equity to build your business, wouldn't you want to realize the value of that as well?
Absolutely. And then in retirement as well, there are some significant tax plays that you can achieve and tax planning opportunities there to really make it worthwhile and beneficial.
Yeah. Andy, lovely to chat, mate. Thank you so much. I didn't even get to ask about your Airbnb in Thurrool. How's that going?
It's going fantastically well. Such a good spot down there.
Yeah.
It was great when we were getting it ready, wandering down through Thurrool, and I looked across the road and there's a Tell Your Wealth there. And I thought, fantastic. But it's such a good spot. Again, in terms of with family, there are 2 lettings. There's a house upstairs, a granny flat downstairs, and the opportunity for us as a family to utilise that asset moving forward.
Yeah.
Hopefully an appreciating asset over time. Again, to leave that for the kids as well.
Nice one. How's it going from a management perspective and having an Airbnb? What have you learned?
Look, we are managing it ourselves just to really get a feel for it.
Nice one.
And that's not for everyone.
No.
Again, you've got to understand how you operate, and we will take the time to do this. However, there are options of getting a manager to deal with it, from the cleaning to the bookings to right the way through. We've taken a more hands-on approach to really try and get a good feel for it.
Yeah.
So it's going really well. It does take a little bit of time, but
so does everyone.
Love it.
Yeah. I love that. I love the fact that, you in property, talking to clients, you know exactly what's going on. We always say, look, is your professional walking the walk? Are they talking the talk, for example? And I think you certainly are, mate, from a business, from a property perspective, from a family perspective. Mate, I think you set a high standard for yourself, obviously for your team, for your clients, mate. So kudos to you. You've been very generous. So this spreadsheet as well, look, Andy's kindly said, look, if you drop us a DM, we can flick across a copy to you. I'm not sure it does much good. I tried tinkering around it myself. You probably need an expert help to walk you through this spreadsheet. So if you are looking, Andy's not here to fish or farm for business, purely here to help and share your knowledge. But if you do need a hand, going through that spreadsheet and you want to kind of get a second opinion, I'm sure you'd be happy to assist anyone listening. And may I also say thank you very much for being on and being part of the journey. And you talk about 2 cents, like I said, you've given far more than that today. So Andy, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Awesome. Like I said, if you found this helpful, if you know someone that's a business owner, someone that's a family business, if you know someone that's on the journey for investing and wants to know a little bit more about land tax and some other tax components that come along with it, share this episode. We love the fact that you guys are sharing and passing this on to your own network and community. So keep it up. Thanks very much for listening. Talk soon.